7 o'clock, okay. There we go. The meeting will come to order. Please take your seats. Thank you. I find that the warrant for this special town meeting has been properly executed and served, and return of service made by a constable of the town of Littleton. We are now in session. I'd like to begin the meeting with the pledge to the flag, and the chair of the select board, Chuck DeCoste, will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, well, it's a pleasure to be back here, and I think it's also been a couple of years since we've had an indoor town meeting, so that will seem different for a little while. I think it looks like everybody got the memo that masks are required for this indoor event per the Board of Health mask mandate, and we ask that you keep the masks on throughout the duration of the meeting, including if you're speaking at the microphone. And we thank you for your adherence to that and keeping all of us safe. So thank you for that. Also, on the topic of the Board of Health, I have a brief announcement that the Littleton Volunteer Corp and the Neshoba Board of Health will be having a Moderna vaccine clinic this Friday from 11 to 2 at 84 Antietam Street at Devon's. There's the Clear Paths for Veterans of New England building. And you can find this online at vaxfinder.com. So thank you for that. All right. I'm sure everyone got their town meeting report in the mail, or they picked up a copy of it this evening. And you'll need that to follow along with the articles and motions. Also on your way in, you should have got a copy of this green update sheet, which is an update to the town meeting report. And it has some additional information that you may find helpful. Also revised motions for Articles 1 and Article 12. Okay. I'll briefly go through the procedures for the town meeting. Some of the rules of the meeting. We've revised the limit on debate to 3 minutes per customer, and we don't think that will disenfranchise anyone. Also, this is an evening meeting, so we have a rule of no new business after 10:30 p.m. And we hope we don't come to that point, but if we do, we'll take stock of where we are and whether we think we can finish in reasonable order. The interim fire chief has asked me to point out the emergency exits behind the screen at either end of the front of the room. Also, the exits behind you, since this is a bit of a different venue than usual. So in the event it becomes necessary to use them, please note where the closest exit is for yourself. All right, we're going to follow, again, the call of the articles procedure, whereby we try to group together non-controversial, more routine articles and take them by means of a single affirmative vote, inclusive of those motions. And we'll do that in just a few minutes. I will tell you right up front that we are not including all of the articles in that call of the articles, specifically the personnel amendment. Well, 2 articles regarding the personnel bylaws will not be part of that. The 550 King Street zoning bylaw amendment will not be part of that. Neither will the borrowing for the sewer expansion project or the rezoning for Robinson Road. Everything else will be fair game, but we know that most of you have come to talk about those 5 articles, so we're going to make sure that that happens. All right. And if you wish to speak, we have a single microphone set up over here, and we ask the people, I think I can't see it from here, I'm told there's a rug just outside the box there, and that's where you should stand. If you're speaking at the microphone, again, keep your mask on. And I'm sorry, what? Okay, all right. Okay, that's fine. Yep. Okay, and you line up if you wish to speak. You need to be recognized by the moderator to speak. When we ask that people address town meeting in civil tones, it's never really been a problem. We just remind folks of that. Unless I hear an objection, only registered voters, town board and committee members, the town administrator and assistant town administrator, town council, and other employees or agents of the town may address town meeting. So that'll be the rule for this meeting. So now we'll turn to the call of the articles. And that's on page 3 of the town meeting report. I'm going to read through the articles that we intend to bundle together and take a single vote on. If anyone objects to any of those articles being included, just yell out hold and we'll come back to that in the normal course of things. And as I said, we're going to pass over some of the major articles on the warrant. But let's start with Article 1, bills of prior years. Article 2, amendments to the FY22 operating budget. Article 3, debt exclusion stabilization fund. 4, appropriation of bond/ban excess premium. 5, Community Preservation Committee, FY22, Community Preservation recommendations. We're going to pass over 6 at this point because there will be no motion on that. We'll come to that later. 7, authorization to sell Lot U14-11 on Shaker Lane. Hold on 7. All right. And number 8 is personnel bylaw and changes to the classification and compensation plan amendments. This is not the amendment to the bylaw per se, so I've been told that this can be part of the consent calendar. We will not make the second one subject to it. Okay. 10, transfer of land to Conservation Commission. 13, grant of easement to Littleton Electric Light Department for library. And 15, road acceptance, Bluebird Way. Okay, so those are the articles that are proposed to be part of the consent calendar. We had one hold, we'll get to that as well. And now I ask for an affirmative motion that is inclusive of the separate motions for Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, I'm sorry, 8, 10, 13, and 15. So move, second. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Nay? Okay, I declare it to be a unanimous vote, and those articles all pass as part of the consent calendar. Thank you very much. We have dealt with a good portion of the warrant. This will give us more time to devote to the rest of the articles. So we'll go back to Article 6, would be the first one of the remaining articles. No motion will be offered for Article 6 tonight, and we're going to pass over the article. So, Madam Clerk, please record no affirmative action taken on Article 6. And then there was a hold on Article 7. Does that gentleman want to come to the microphone and tell us if you have a question or if you want that to be debated, as other articles would be?
Basically, I'd just like an explanation of what's being sold off and why.
Was the question what's being sold off? What is the lot?
Identify yourself, maybe?
Okay, does anyone wish to describe the lot that I'll call upon the Assistant Town Administrator, Mr. Layden?
Joseph Layden, Assistant Town Administrator. Good evening, everyone. The Article 7 is seeking authorization for the Select Board to sell off a small parcel off of Shaker Lane. This has been deemed not a buildable lot by the Building Department, and the intention would be to offer to sale to be deed restricted, that it not be buildable and be maintained as open space.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we can move to a vote on that. That was the only question. All those in favor of the motion as printed in the town meeting report for Article 7, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The article passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And Article 8 was part of the consent calendar, so we now come to Article 9, the actual amendment of the personnel bylaws. Let me briefly put that on the floor for you. Moved and seconded by the Personnel Board that the town vote to approve, amend the general bylaw by deleting sections 33-1 through 33-41 in their entirety and inserting in place thereof a new personnel bylaw containing section 33-1 through 3319 as follows. And then you've got, I think about 10 pages, several pages of the changes. Basically, it would replace the existing personnel bylaw with a new bylaw. All right, I know that you've got a member of the Personnel Board wishes to speak to that. Please identify yourself when you come to the microphone. Over here, sorry, just one mic tonight, but identify yourself for those who may not know who you are.
My name is Anita Harding. I'm Chairman of the Personnel Board. Good evening. I'm going to read this because I'll forget something if I don't. In March, the Select Board announced that they would be putting an article for June town meeting to do away with the personnel bylaw, which also meant that the Personnel Board would go away. The Personnel Board was concerned that this was not a good idea and that some non-union employees could possibly lose some of their benefits. After much discussion, the Personnel Board had a meeting with all the non-union employees to explain what was being proposed and to have them weigh in on their questions and their concerns. Selectman Chuck DeCoste was present at that meeting, and he heard all of their concerns, such as, if it is in the bylaw, it can only be changed by town meeting. If it is in the handbook, it can be changed without a town meeting vote. After the meeting, as the chairman of the Personnel Board, I went to the Select Board asking them to withdraw the warrant article from June town meeting and give the Personnel Board, the administration and employees time to come up with a better bylaw that everyone could be happy with. Through the months that followed, the Personnel Board had many working meetings editing the existing bylaw. We work closely with Joe Layden, the Assistant Town Administrator, Anthony Ansaldi, the Town Administrator, and all the employees. We moved several sections from the existing bylaw to the employee handbook, and we changed some items that were left in the bylaw. The Personnel Board being removed with the new bylaw. If the new bylaw is voted in tonight, we created the concept of a Personnel Advisory Committee. This committee would work with the HR department on matters that they needed to help with. The new bylaw was reviewed by the employees, and their concerns were addressed to their satisfaction. The Personnel Board voted unanimously to approve the new bylaw. The items that were removed from the bylaw have been put into the employee handbook. Those items have been edited and updated by the Personnel Board and sent to the Select Board for their approval. So the warrant article that you see before you tonight, when voted, will replace the existing bylaw. It will remove the Personnel Board and create the concept of a Personnel Advisory Committee, which would be created at a later date by the Select Board.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard regarding Article 9, the amendment of the Personnel Bylaw? Okay, Select Board, rather.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As the current Selectman appointee to the Personnel Committee, I just want to extend my thanks and the board's thanks to Anita and to another long-term member, Bill Schmidt, who were a part of giving Littleton professional HR guidance for many years and have served a vital role in transitioning us to meet the challenges in the rapidly changing world of hiring and other employee practices today. So thank you for your work on that, and look forward to taking on the ever-changing world of human resources and the complexities of it with this new flexibility. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir, please identify yourself and make your comments.
David Sill, 53 Washington Drive. Many good people in our town have participated on the Personnel Board after being elected by their fellow employees of the town. This board being made up of employees of the town, two citizens, the Finance Committee member, Board of Selectmen member, and a town administrator. This Personnel Board worked hard performing their duties and have done a great job to this date. That includes my wife, who was elected by her peers at the town hall. I propose an amendment to this article that will keep this board in its present form with its present duties. Thank you.
Then your amendment, sir?
The amendment is to this article keeps the Personnel Board in its present state with its present duties.
Do you have a written amendment or specifics?
The amendment will read that the amendment to this article keeps the board, the Personnel Board, in its present form with its present duties. That's the amendment.
So that seems to be an argument not to support this bylaw, because this would create a Personnel Advisory Committee instead of the Personnel Board. Is that? Well, I'm going to ask Town Council to weigh in, so hang on.
Good evening, Tom Harrington, Town Council. Mr. Moderator, in response to the suggestion of an amendment, I wanted to let the meeting know that we've offered advice and have been working with the Selectmen and the current Personnel Board on correcting the current situation. As HR evolves and develops, it becomes problematic to have town meeting members, or not town meeting members, town employees sitting on a board that is partially functioning as the HR department. So part of the reason that we've helped work on this change and advise accepting this change is to get ourselves out of that situation. It's going to lead to a lawsuit sooner rather than later. And I think that the best legal advice I can offer is that maintaining the personnel board in its current form is not a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'm wondering what your specific amendment is, David. Would seem like there'd be a number of amendments you'd be offering if you were looking to keep things the same, but I don't want to make the amendment for you. You're arguing to keep the Personnel Committee intact. Council has advised that that's not his advice to the town going forward, but you have a right to make an amendment. I just don't know where you're looking to make it.
I thought it was pretty clear. Instead of the board that you're proposing, you leave the board as it's constituted now. That's the amendment.
I don't think that's, again, Council, that
As a bylaw.
So,
that seems to be a vote against the change, to keep things the same, correct?
Mr. Moderator, if I'm understanding, without coming forward with specific edits to the motion before the board, I think the speaker is just looking to vote against this proposal. If there's a specific change, I'm happy to look at it and work on it, but I don't know what that is. And it sounds like what the previous speaker is driving at is really just a no vote.
Okay.
So I
Thank you.
think if one wanted to keep things the same, you would vote against the proposed new bylaw.
Yeah, excuse me, I just want to change the membership rules, that's all. That includes the way that it's elected now. That's all I want to change.
Well, there'd have to be some specifics in terms of an amendment. You can't just,
Okay,
Do
the
it as
amendment
a-
I propose is that the Personnel Board would be made up of employees of the town as elected by their peers, 2 citizens, a Finance Committee member, a Board of Selectmen member, and the Town Administrator. And the board would be in its present form with its present duties. That's the amendment. Thank you.
I don't know where that would be inserted and what it would replace or remove. Again, I'll say if the intent is to keep things the way they are, then you would not vote to approve the change. Okay? Yes, sir?
Mark Rambacher, 205 Hartwell Avenue. I have a question on section 3315, item D, where it says employees, it basically says if someone is absent for 6 days or more, then, and someone else assumes their duty, that they get a pay bump. So my question is, first, is this 6 calendar days or working days? And just for clarity, this basically means that if Anthony goes on vacation for a week, Joe is assuming his duties and gets paid as if he was the town administrator rather than the assistant. I'm not asking for it to be changed other than clarification on 6 days or working days. I just want to understand what it actually means.
Okay, someone want to respond to that? Do we have a response? Town administrator, is that right? Okay. It was 3315, section D.
Midway on page 23, it's on page 23, towards the top,
Right.
section D. 3315,
The
item
question
D.
was regarding section 33-15, paragraph D, found on page 23 in your booklet.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes,
Thank
Town
you.
Administrator.
Good evening, Anthony Insall, the Town Administrator. 33D, Mark, references 6, that's 6 working days, business days.
Okay, so can we so I'll make an amendment to change it to 6 working days rather than 6 days? Do I need to do that? Because it just says 6 days, it doesn't clarify.
6 business days,
Fine,
working days.
6 business days? But then for clarity, this basically means if you're on a 2-week vacation, then Joe gets paid your salary?
So this is what was in the existing bylaw right now. So something like that would have to be determined by the select board as far as moving forward. It's not so right now, if it was 2 weeks, that would be something that I'd work out with the select board to let them know. But we haven't run into that problem yet.
So if any town employee, if Diane's on vacation and someone's assuming her duties, then someone gets paid extra?
Diane's a town clerk, she's an elected position.
But she's still paid, she's also an employee, she gets paid. My question is, if someone gets, a paid employee is on vacation and someone else is assuming their duties.
Someone is delegated to assume. So if I was to leave and I told the select board that I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks, then Joe would be assuming the duties.
Right, but there's nothing in here that says the select board gets to say whether he gets paid extra or not. This just says he does, right? Or am I misreading this?
The way it reads right now, correct?
Okay, thank you.
All right, I believe there was an amendment to 3315, paragraph D, to read a period of 6 business days.
One more clarification. That's if Joe was assigned. So if he's not assigned to resume those duties, then that does not happen. And that would be any other department. So if, I'll use the DPW for example. If the second in command is not specifically assigned, then that would not pertain to them.
All right. So there's a proposed amendment to add the word business to a period of 6 business days to make it more clear. Is that was offered? Is that seconded? Seconded. I think without objection. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so that is amended to read 6 business days or more. All right. Anyone else wish to be heard regarding Article 9? Please line up if you intend to speak. I guess that's what I should have said earlier if I didn't. Okay, yes, sir.
George Sanders, 672
What's that?
Great Road. Mr. Moderator, I'd like to know what is 6 business days? Normally it's Monday through Friday is the 5 business days.
I don't think they would need be consecutive, but counsel, do you want to define that term?
Six business days is any day that is not a weekend or holiday. So it's a day that this employee will come to work and serve in a higher position for which they currently don't have the job title, but are performing the duties of that higher position.
And through you, Mr. Moderator, does that individual get paid the position that he is serving in? Because normally if someone is filling in a position and they elevate them up to it, normally they get paid temporary that pay.
So, may I? Mr. Moderator?
Thank you.
I believe the question being asked, and I apologize if I have this wrong, but if, using Joe and Anthony as examples, Anthony is on vacation. Joe's in the office. Joe continues in his role as assistant town administrator and is paid as such. If Anthony were to be unavailable or absent, which is not a vacation leave or a sick leave, and his appointing authority determines that we need a town administrator or someone to function in the town administrator role, they would specifically assign Joe the duties of the town administrator. So there is an assignment that occurs. When that assignment occurs, Joe is now taking on additional duties and is paid to take on those additional duties. At such time as Anthony returns, Joe returns to the assistant town administrator slot and to his original assistant town administrator salary. So this is not a situation where if someone goes on vacation, whoever's left in the office gets paid more.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else lined up to speak, so I think we can move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion as read under Article 9 as amended, it's a majority vote, recall. Please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. It passes by the necessary majority. Please record that, Madam Clerk. Oh, that was unanimous, yeah. Okay. All right, we'll move next to Article 10 was voted previously. Article 11, zoning bylaw amendment, 550 King Street. I will read the motion, then we have a presentation from the planning board. Moved and seconded by the planning board that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaws as follows. Insert in section 173-22A, paragraph 1, under the category of mixed-use districts, immediately below the existing entry for the Village Common VC district, a new entry for the King Street Common KC district. And what follows is the new Article 31, King Street Common Zoning District. It runs for some 10 pages. I don't intend to read it to you this evening, but that is the motion that is on the floor. I will first ask the planning board for a report on their public hearing, and then they will make a presentation. So is there a planning board representative? Yes, Mr. Montanari.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The planning board had public hearings on October 7th to endorse this article and send it to the town meeting floor. And I want to give you a brief overview of what we're talking about here. It's a zoning change from Industrial A and Industrial B, which is warehousing. Currently, we have office space there. As everyone knows, we've had IBM, we've had Digital, we've had Compaq, we've had 40 years of office space. Not only with COVID, but with the nature of the economy as it is, office space is not very desirable anymore. So the only option now is to sell the land and put big warehouse, big boxes out there, because it's zoned Industrial A and Industrial B. We have proposed an amendment, zoning change, to allow mixed use, meaning in the front of the property is going to have form-based coding, walkability shops, restaurants, coffee shops, things like that. In the back portion of the building, 255 feet away from the street, is proposed mixed use of an apartment or retail in the front and apartments in the back. There is talk about senior housing out there. For the first time in a number of years, we have an opportunity to have age-in-place housing, senior housing, independent, assisted living, and memory care on one site, so that we're excited about the potential of having that there. The zoning would allow us to revitalize the area, revitalize the common, and we have slides and presentation to address that, but all we're talking about right now is a zoning change. We're not talking about anything, what comes with it. That will be handled when the planning board meets, once this is approved, or if it is approved, to talk about all the issues that will go with it. This is to change it from industrial A and B to a mixed-use property at 550, 551 King Street. And we'll have Maren will do a brief presentation and we'll answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, town meeting. My name is Maren Toohill. I'm Littleton Town Planner. So I hope most of you are familiar by now with the 550 King Street site. It's a former site of IBM. IBM had told us several years ago that they would not be re-signing their lease, and they recently vacated this site. The real estate investment trust that owned the site has sold to a local developer, Lupoli Development. So that's why we're looking at the 550 King Street site. As you can see, as you know, it backs up to Route 495, but it's also immediately adjacent to our Littleton Common. So it's a very important piece for the town. So it's now vacant. What else is going on there? Littleton needs housing that is affordable. Littleton needs new small and medium scale economic development opportunities. Town sewer is another item that would significantly benefit from additional ratepayers. The tax burden shift that is currently occurring because of the loss of market value from office buildings, that can be addressed by rezoning. And as Mark mentioned, we don't want large-scale warehousing and distribution facilities immediately adjacent to the Littleton Common. So why are we doing this? What is this based on? I reached back to the 2008 identification of this site as a priority development site and an expedited permitting site. So that was votes that the town took that long ago. Our housing production plan, our master plan, and the Littleton Common revitalization roadmap studies all indicate the need for redevelopment near and at the Common, and this site certainly fits the bill there. So what does the bylaw do? It creates a new zoning district called the King Street Common Zoning District. It sets in place a special permit process with the planning board as a special permit granting authority, and it requires a very comprehensive special permit application so that there's no segmentation of the site to avoid the need for mitigation. It adds multifamily, mixed use, apartments, condos, senior living options, office, R&D, restaurant, medical services uses to the site. And it takes away the ability for development of large-scale warehousing and distribution centers. So what else is in the bylaw? It includes specific performance standards and detailed criteria that plans must meet in order to be approved by the planning board, and includes a reference to the Aquifer and Water Resource Overlay District to assure that our groundwater quality standards are met. So then we get to ask, how would development at this site impact our taxes and town sewer? This is brand new information from our finance department. Tells us that in 3 to 5 years, the wastewater treatment plant on this site will need to be replaced. Cost estimates range from $6.5 million to $13 million. That cost, without a rezoning, is all on the taxpayer. If we rezone and development at 550 King Street moves forward, then that cost is shifted, so 5% is municipal buildings, and 78% would be paid by new development at 550 King Street, and the 17% remaining is other uses located in the district. So, big picture, the town's debt service would greatly decrease by passing the proposed rezoning of 550 King Street. So some questions we have heard. What about traffic? A full traffic study, peer-reviewed, and mitigation measures will be required as part of any special permit application in the King Street Common District. The developer in town will work closely with MassDOT to implement mitigation measures to keep traffic level of service within acceptable parameters. And once again, we can address the traffic trailers that would be associated with warehousing at the site. Okay, how would it affect our schools? It's hard to put numbers to that question until we get a specific development proposal, but the idea is to allow development with studio 1, 2, and a few 3-bedroom units, plus senior living units. So the number of students we anticipate is very small, and likely smaller than the number of school choice students that currently are in Littleton this year. But we also know that whatever new students do move to Littleton, they will get a quality education here. I did include a graph. Blue is 2010, orange is 2021. You can see the difference in population, number of housing units, and number of school students. I did choose 2021 for the data point for school students because had we chosen last year, there was actually a decrease in the number of students. I guess my point here is there is no straight line correlation between the number of housing units and the number of students in our schools. How would development at this site affect our first responders? The fire department is clear that they would be able to service the buildings at the proposed height. And if we look at the number of calls that would be anticipated to a multifamily development, it's similar to the number of calls across the town. Some would argue that there, for some reason, seem to be more calls to apartment buildings. We don't see that in our, thank you. So we don't see that in our experience. Okay, what about the 75-foot maximum height? What does that look like? There's a picture in there that includes a demonstration that was done, a lift that was set to the 75-foot level. So I will take a moment. Okay, and how would development at this site affect existing businesses? We would be bringing new residents, new customers, new consumers to revitalize Littleton Common. So they would shop and dine at our existing businesses and provide a format for, or be customers for new businesses as well. What would new development look like at this site? Well, in August of this year, the Select Board and Planning Board received some sketches from Lupoli Development, the different development areas. The area up in front near King Street would be a mixed-use development area with shops. I think Mark was giving an overview of that. They hope to set aside the Tuttle House, the green space that's next to that. Residential apartment buildings would be located in the current parking lot that's closest to 495 and Route 119. They're hoping to reuse the existing office buildings, repurpose those. We don't have any further information on that at the moment. And we do have a sketch or two about what the development closest to King Street could look like. That's that one there. And the rest of it is just looking for questions. Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we open the floor up to comments, I'm told that it's difficult to hear some of the speakers. So I'm going to permit that those who wish to lower their mask at the microphone may do so. Please leave your mask on your trips to and from and when you're waiting in line, but if you wish to lower your mask, you may. And with that, is there anyone who wishes to be heard? With respect to Article 11, please line up at the single microphone, identify yourself, and give each other room. All right, very good. Yes, sir.
Brian Tarbach, 16 Fletcher Lane. With the number of, let's see, so this new development will have retail as part of it. Given the amount of open stores all along the common and even up in the point, what research has been done to look at the impact on our existing retail stores by having increased competition at this new facility? Question one. Question two, related, I'm guessing that all your data is based on 100% occupancy, sort of the same numbers we were told when the point went in, and we all have seen that that has not been the case. So I'm just wondering, what percent occupancy have you used in driving your numbers?
Okay, thank you. Who would like to handle that?
Yep, I'll start.
Okay.
The Littleton Common Revitalization Roadmap was the study that outlined the need for additional residential development in the common. And that identified, if I'm not mistaken, 250 apartments would be needed to help revitalize Littleton Common. As far as the point, every available site in that development is currently occupied. There are additional renters, retailers, additional businesses waiting in the wings to occupy the sites that look like they're open now. As soon as the modifications to the wastewater treatment plant are complete, they'll be able to do their fit-ups and move in. And then the final phase of the point could be developed if and when the wastewater treatment plant is expanded.
Mr. Moderator, I'm going to respectfully suggest that I didn't get an answer to my question, so I'll try again. What study, if any, has been done on the impact the retail part of this new development will have on the viability of the existing stores in the common area? And it's fine if the answer is no, but I want to hear if the answer is no.
Okay, it would be premature to have information, well, we don't have that information to date.
Okay, so we're going to do a zoning to add more retail without having looked at how that rezoning will affect our existing business. That's what we're just being told.
Okay. I think that's your answer, sir. You've had
Okay.
two questions.
The retail zoning has already been approved. We have form-based code in the front of this property already. You're not rezoning the retail part of it. You're zoning the back part to put a mixed use in there, which is housing. Right now, 255 feet of that front, it's 1,100 feet of it is already form-based code retail. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what's behind it, the apartment, the senior housing, the condos, the independent living housing, all of that is not allowed because it's industrial. We're changing the zoning to a mixed use to allow that. So right now, the retail has already been approved when you did form-based coding 2 years ago.
Fair enough, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is John Babavel, 11 Chestnut Lane. I have 3 questions. One, it seems like the way this is written, it would allow 820 new households, given the density and size of the parcel, which would be 22% more households in Littleton. Is that correct?
The parcel is approximately 39 acres, but yes, if you were to develop each and every square inch of the site with residential, theoretically, you could put close to 750 units, 800 units on there, but frankly, it's not going to fit.
You wouldn't have to do that because it says that the total lot coverage shall be calculated, right? You only have to, you could build them all in the corner, the way this is written. The second question is, I've heard mention senior housing a few times. It looks like senior housing is permitted with this plan, but it's not required.
Correct. Housing is required.
And then the third question is, there's a list of criteria to take into account before the planning board would issue a permit. It says that the planning board would take them into account, but it doesn't say that they have to let them influence their decision in any way, only that they have to listen.
And the rest of the criteria that the planning board must consider in their decision is in the current bylaw. This just it adds to the current requirements for special permits.
Okay. Am I allowed to propose amendments this time?
You may propose an amendment. Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to propose an amendment to section 132-232. I would like to add point J, that the adequacy and availability of classroom space is one of the considerations. And I would like that if any of the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, that the planning board shall not issue the special permit.
Yeah, I'm having trouble finding where you're adding this. Could you tell us again?
Sorry, section 173-232, which is the general performance standards and criteria.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to add another point that availability and adequacy of classroom space be one of their criteria, and that if any of the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, that the planning board shall not issue the permit. I don't, sorry. I mean, not like fully written out, I have scribbles.
Okay, if you could,
Sorry, this is a zoning bylaw, we need specific.
I could.
we'll get back to you if you put that in writing for us, sir.
I have a second amendment that I'd like to propose as well.
Well, could you put them both in writing, maybe? Then we can hear from some other speakers.
Sure.
Yeah,
Do you
thank
have
you.
paper and a pen I can use?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, I come here tonight to speak on 550 because first and foremost, I think that we ought to understand that we have a lot to be thankful. We live in the greatest nation among nations in this world. And we live in a state that's a commonwealth, that's probably one of the finest commonwealth in this nation. We have a lot to be thankful for. I'm here to say to you, there comes a time when we need to do something for ourselves as taxpayers. We've asked our selected members on the select board to find someone that will come into this town that will be orient and caring about the characteristics of this town and the people. They brought someone in that brought his wife and his daughter with him. And I was mentioning that to somebody, and they said, yeah, and I bet that wife and daughter is keeping him straight. Irregardless, they came here wanting to do right in Littleton. Littleton is always wanting someone to come and work with Littleton. The previous owner of that property was not wanting to work with the town of Littleton for the future of Littleton. They came in and they decided that yes, they spent $21,100,000. They have proposed over a few years to spend maybe $380 million. but not looking into the far distance of Littleton. Littleton is a very good community. I love Littleton. That's why I'm here, and that's why I stand up and speak my piece about Littleton. We are a community that want to do right. We are a community that have tolerable people in this community. We have very educated people in this community. And we have a lot of good people in our town employees and also on the very boards that have worked very diligently to bring this piece of communication to us. And here tonight, I humble before you and ask you to do something for yourself tonight. About 77% of the taxes that's paid in this town before they do a waiver is paid by the citizen of this town. The citizen, not the industrial commercial, the citizen. We need to help reduce a little bit of this. All this is not going to take place at one time, but it's going to take place in a way that we're going to hold the planning board feet to the fire, that they do what needs to be done in protecting Littleton and listen to us and squeezing everything they can as for affordable housing and senior housing for the town of Littleton. We need to do this. We need to pass this.
Okay, sir, that's time.
I want to thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Jerry Delpiore, New Estate Road. I was reading this and I was shocked at the intensity of residential development this represents. 6 stories, 700 plus units, 20 units per acre. This is far taller, far higher density than anything else in this town. Yet we hear the same buzzwords: affordable housing, senior friendly. We opened up the town to high density development a few years ago. How many of those senior friendly houses are really affordable? And how many of them are $500,000 2-bedroom condos? I think we need to be well aware of what this is potentially opening the town up to. And I'd like to know where this level of intensity of residential development came from. Did the developer write this bylaw?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kristen Guichard, Paula Beth Street. I just wanted to say that I'm very excited tonight to be voting yes on this article. I think this is a lifetime opportunity for the town of Littleton and our community. This is a zoning change that I think is going to unlock the form-based code that was already approved in the front there. And this type of redevelopment, focusing mixed-use development in an area that has the infrastructure already in place, is the most sustainable way that we can develop our town. We're focusing our development in areas that are not on our farmlands or on our scenic vistas that we have in the outskirts of town or coming in off of Goldsmith Street. This area is an area that has a huge parking lot with 2 buildings already there, and I think this is a big opportunity for us to use this location in a smart way. I also wanted to make a statement that I am a bit concerned about some statements raised about the additional potential of school children. I don't think it's right to pull up the drawbridge when so many of us maybe have had children here through the school system already and have had that opportunity. And I'm concerned about the potential fair housing implications if we're starting to talk about limiting children or limiting families and the types of families or people that are moving into our town. And I just wanted to say again that I'm very excited in voting for this article, and I hope that you join me.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
James Kennedy, 50 Gilson Road, Littleton. I'm also president of the Littleton Business Association. And I would like to address a point that someone had asked about competition and should we be concerned about small business owners in town when we're adding new competition? And I say absolutely not. We should not be concerned about that. Competition is good for economic growth. Competition is good for business. And this is going to bring more customers to all these small business owners in town. And they're excited to have that. If you're a B2B company, there are huge opportunities here as well. All these new businesses, I myself own a web design company. Sorry. I myself own a web design company, and all these business owners are potential customers, and they're going to help me pay my bills, support my kids, help pay my taxes, and that's great. And I look forward to those customers. I also have some questions about risks. One of the things that I really loved about this development was that it's going to reduce the risk to taxpayers as opposed to what we have now, where we have a single tenant in a very large space, and there's very huge risk of loss of revenues. Could someone maybe talk about that from the planning board?
Okay, thank you. The planning board.
As I started, for over 40 years, some of the people in the town who have the same color hair as I do remember that digital was the first one that came in. We put all our eggs in the digital basket. Then it was Compaq, then it was IBM and HP. We're getting away from an office building. We don't have to rely on a 500,000 square foot office building that pays approximately $40–50 million. We're now down to warehouse. If we don't approve this, it's going to be a warehouse that's going to pay $8 or $10 million. So from an economic standpoint, we're going backwards. We're also not going to be stuck with having to deal with the big corporations of the world that may come to Littleton or may go somewhere else. The buildings have been empty for the past 40 or 50 years. 5 years here, 3 years there, 10 years there. We're not going to have that. We're not going to have to worry about 500,000 square feet of office space. It'll be mixed use. It'll be people living there. That's the difference, and that's the change that we're all looking forward to and we're all optimistic about. Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing that I want to just, if you could clarify the cost savings that our taxpayers are going to have. I know the numbers were up in the presentation, and I saw in terms of sewer costs, the sewer costs were going to be substantially higher if we didn't have another user on board to pay for the use and the construction of the sewer.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I get it. Yep. Mr. Moderator, thank you. Anthony Ansaldi, Town Administrator. The question was posed as far as loss in revenue, I think it was. So 550 King Street is currently assessed at $60 million. What we're projecting that to be assessed at for next year is decreased to about $38 million. That is a decrease in taxes that we're going to collect between $700,000 and $800,000. That means the burden is now going to be shifted to you, the residents, and that means your tax bill is going to feel that pressure of approximately $130 per year, plus the 2.5% of your assessed value. So this is what the Select Board recognized when we were notified that IBM is moving out. That potential loss in revenue is something that they wanted to make sure that we addressed right away, and trying to get somebody that would come in there, because that's a hit to the taxpayer. And depending on who else bought it, it could have even dropped more if they tore down those buildings. And again, that burden gets shifted to you. That's the potential loss in revenue that we're looking at. That's what was very exciting when we were vetting a lot of different developers, and you heard about warehouse. We absolutely had people that wanted to do warehousing with 120 bays for tractor trailer trucks, which would have been going down up and down your roads. So this is something that, tax-wise, that for the $800,000 in losing of potential tax revenue, that's why that was so important to get the ball rolling on rezoning 550 King Street.
Thank you.
The only other question was regarding the cost for the sewer. Go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Moderator, yes, through you to the previous speaker, he asked a question relative to the impact on the sewer, and the impact is significant. With Hudson Properties, the previous REIT that Myron and Mark had referenced earlier, that owned the IBM building, the landlord, they didn't want to play ball with us. They had no interest in being part of our sewer district, and therefore the lion's share of the burden would have lied on us as the largest user of the sewer for the community municipal sewer project. With this potential rezoning and with this particular developer being willing to opt in and become, the water and sewer commissioners have voted to incorporate this property into the sewer district now, the burden will shift. Instead of the town being 60% of the burden, that burden will now shift to this property, and that'll be realized by the taxpayers who would have to bear the burden of the municipal sewer, but also to all the users that would potentially be using the sewer, whether it be commercial or residential. That burden will now be reduced significantly because it's paid for through betterments, and those betterments will now be 60 to 75% will be paid for by this development.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
I put the amendment in writing. Do you want me
Okay,
to bring it?
could you restate your amendment? We're going to deal with them one at a time. You said you had two.
Yes, I do.
So please read your first one and then submit it to the clerk.
Section 173-232, I would like to add to the first paragraph that if the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, the planning board shall not issue the special permit. And add item J to the list, adequacy and availability of classroom space.
Okay, do you have that in writing?
Yes.
Okay, if you could bring it forward. All right. Single line now, but. Second sentence. Okay, the proposed amendment, we're on page 29, section 173-232. The first sentence that ends in King Street Common zoning district, period, then add to that paragraph, if the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, the planning board shall not issue the special permit. And then on the following page, add an item J to the list, and the J will read adequacy and availability of classroom space. Is that correct? Is that correct? Okay, do I hear a second? Second? Okay, now debate is open on that specific amendment. So, speakers coming to the microphone, please contain your remarks to the amendment. Go ahead, sir.
Alan McRae, 14 Coughlin Road. Mr. Moderator, there's two parts to that amendment. Could you split the vote on that? There are some of us, me included, that might not agree with one part but think the other part is fine.
Well, do you consider that to be a single amendment, sir? To be, it's fine to split them, okay? But we can vote on each part individually. I think town council's reviewing the amendment at the moment, so he may have an opinion. Town council would like to address the town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So if you're following along, there's two amendments, one to the very first paragraph of 173-232. It currently reads, "The planning board shall consider the following general criteria before issuing a special permit for the development within the King Street development." What's been added is, if the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, the planning board shall not issue the special permit. I don't have a problem with that. I would suggest that the language already indicates that they're supposed to satisfy the criteria. So I think explaining it doesn't hurt, but I think that's the meaning anyways. The second addition, I'm not clear about. So we're adding an additional criterion, J, and it says adequacy and availability of classroom space. So here are my concerns in no specific order. Are you referring to classroom space at this site? Meaning, is the developer supposed to come forward in his or her application to the town with classroom space on the site? And is that classroom space for public education? I suspect not. I suspect that we're supposed to be doing some sort of an analysis at our current schools and decide if we can handle the new students coming into the development. I think the problem with that is, how are you going to determine the number of students associated with the new development? And I also have a concern that the Attorney General is not going to like the idea that we're putting in an exaction fee or an extraction fee for schools. So remember, schools are a fundamental right in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are required to educate our children, ages 5 through 18. So this feels like we're putting that burden on the developer, where the burden to educate the children is actually on the town. So I'm concerned that one's not going to pass muster, but I can't sit here before you and say it won't pass muster. It just raises some concerns, and I think it would be difficult for the board to determine adequacy and for the developer to identify the number of students. And then I guess further, if the developer identifies a specific number of students and that number changes, can the planning board then invalidate the permit? I don't know the answer to that, but that would be a real concern. And I think you would hear a fairness argument from the applicant. Why is the applicant for this parcel burdened with paying for public school classrooms when no other developer in town on another lot outside of this zone has the same requirement? So again, I can't say that it wouldn't pass muster, but I'm not convinced it would either, and I think it raises several questions.
Okay, Council, but the amendments are in order, correct?
Correct.
So we can handle them separately as it's been requested, if that's the will of town meeting. Sir, did you want to?
May I ask a question to the council? I agree with your assertion that it's our responsibility to provide education. Is it unreasonable to expect that we make the provision for that before we bring the children to town rather than afterwards?
I'm not sure I understand Mr. Moderator, I threw you to the previous speaker. I'm not sure I understand the question.
My question is, and my intention through the amendment was that we plan ahead to provide the resources required rather than create a crisis. And would that not be considered when we're deciding whether it's exclusionary?
So Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, I understand the planning argument that it makes sense to try to put this on the developer as opposed to the town.
Can you just take that from you? Yeah, sorry.
I'm just not sure that the Attorney General, when they look at the bylaw to approve it, are going to agree that it's appropriate for us to pass the burden of classroom construction onto a developer in a specific part of town.
Okay, so would you say it would be more appropriate to defer making a zoning change like this before we've made that plan then?
I don't have an opinion on that. This is before the board and the motion's been made.
Mr. Moderator, may I speak?
Yes.
I want to address that.
Planning board.
So we brought the school department before the planning board to discuss the implications of this rezoning and what it would do for school children. Assuming that this is going to happen within the next couple of years, and going by past history, we looked at the development down off of Great Road, which added 200 units, basically families, 2 and 3 bedroom units, and it added, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if the school department can correct me, I think it added 52 students over the 5 years that it took to build that out. We currently have over 92 spaces in the town of Littleton that are not filled, and we use outside students to fill those spots. So if we approve this, let's just say we approved it next year or two, we're not going to get 52 students because they're going to be mostly one studio, 1 and 2 bedroom, and they're going to be senior housing out there. So we're not going to get 52 students. We have 90, 95 or 92 extra spaces right now. So right now we currently have more than enough that if this project was to come before the planning board in the near future, that we could adequately address the number of students that it could potentially add to the school department.
Okay, debate is open regarding the First Amendment proposed to add to the first paragraph. The language, if the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, the planning board shall not issue the special permit. No, yeah, I'm sorry. Debate is open. Someone's at the microphone. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, my concern is about, following off of this gentleman.
Please identify yourself. Please identify yourself and then make your comment.
My name is Megan Pedersen. I'm at 15 Woodridge Road, and my concern follows on the behalf of that gentleman right there about adding Article J. I'm currently a teacher, and I'm working with a school that has over 3,000 students, and we are currently working on redefining and rebuilding our school. I'm worried that if we add, I fully believe that, yes, we do need to make sure we have lots of opportunities for our kids, but kind of on the other side of that, as we are adding so many different apartments, yeah, you can say, 1 and 2 bedrooms, that's still going to allow children to join the school. We need to be really careful that we are making sure that we are at 80% capacity within our schools, and then also that we're not putting too much burden on our teachers in order to meet all the needs and regulations of our students as well. So that kind of makes me concerned as we do allow for so many just apartments.
Okay, thank you. Item J is actually not up for debate currently. Is that just that first sentence added to the introductory paragraph, if you will? Yes, sir.
Mike Fontanella, Harwood Avenue. I'd just like to address, Mark mentioned that the analysis was that the development on Great Road netted 52 students. The way to think about it is not that only 52 students moved into that development and came to Littleton. The net growth in our student enrollment over that period of time was plus 52. And the reason that it wasn't more, as many of us thought it might be, is that the demographic is fewer school-age children available to come to school across the nation and across the Commonwealth. That demographic trend is identified, measured, and unavoidable. So when we think, and Marin said there is no direct line or correlation between growth in housing stock and enrollment in the schools,
That's true across all the communities in the Commonwealth because of that demographic trend of fewer students available. Baby boomers' kids are having fewer kids than their parents did, and that's been measured and true. The thing that's going to predict whether or not you hold on to your student population or go up or down a little bit is things like the quality of your education and are you a desirable town to live in for various reasons. So that's what you should be considering, at least what I'm considering when I think about is this type of development going to impact the schools. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, if anyone wishes to address the amendment to add the additional language to the first paragraph, please go to the microphone.
I move to call the question. Second. On the amendment.
Okay, please identify
Dina
yourself.
Flockhart, 61 Gilson Road.
Okay, there was a motion to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor, please signify aye. Those opposed? No. No, okay, that's a 2/3 vote. We will take a vote now on that amendment. To add the language, if the criteria are found inadequate, unsuitable, or insufficient, the planning board shall not issue the special permit. All those in favor of adding that language, the first paragraph in section 173-232, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. We will now proceed to the amendment to add a letter J to the list of general criteria. And item J would read adequacy and availability of classroom space. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to that, or can we take a vote on that as well? Okay. All those in favor of adding an item J that states adequacy and availability of classroom space signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, the amendment does not pass, it fails. And I declare that portion of it a vote. Sir, did you have something else you wanted to, yes, the first part passed.
Yes, but you have my paper.
Yes, I know. And from reading through it, it looks like you've got 3 additional amendments.
They can be taken as one.
Or 2, correct? One is to, why don't you read them from the microphone first, sir?
The second one is to adjust the heights in section 173-233 because they seem out of line with the norms of the town and the surrounding communities. In section H, sub A dot I propose changing 4 stories or 50 feet to 2.5 stories, 35 feet. And in item I, subsection A, to change 6 stories or 75 feet to 3 stories or 50 feet, and 4 stories or 60 feet to 3 stories or 50 feet.
Okay. Those are his amendments. They've been seconded. We will vote them separately and discuss them separately as we have been doing. So we'll turn to section 173-233. Item H, paragraph A, and item I, where it begins residential use buildings. The amendment is to change 4 stories to 2.5 stories and 50 feet to 35 feet. So the floor is open to debate on that particular amendment. Okay, yes, sir?
Yeah, I'm Bruce Tornell, 201 Harwood Avenue. Just a clarification, I guess, because it's not clear to me. So it says, it gives those distances, but it says excluding 495. Does that mean that down by 495 you could have a 10-story building, or what does that mean?
Okay. Planning board?
This, remind me which section says excluding 495?
173-233H, letter H.
Oh, okay, so excluding 495 refers to the 100 feet of a public way. It doesn't refer to the below. So the result is within 255 feet of King Street, residential use buildings, according to the bylaw proposed, would have a maximum height of 4 stories or 50 feet. Commercial use buildings would be 2.5 stories or 35 feet. Institutional use buildings would be 3 stories or 50 feet. And same for accessory, just as listed here, as long as they're not within 100 feet of a public way or Route 495.
Okay, thank you.
Jen Stack, 40 Bulkley Road, on behalf of my neighbor back here who asked that question. I don't think that was exactly the question, Maren. I think the question has to do with if it's with, it says excluding 495. So specifically leaving out the 495 portion means that what can happen within range of 495. Am I correct, sir? Is that your question?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that it's somehow
Yep.
if it's near 495.
So his concern is if it's close to 495, it's sort of left out of these height restrictions. And then the question is, what height restrictions exist, if any, within 495?
Okay, so this section of the bylaw is for within 255 feet of King Street. There's different height restrictions for that area outside of 255 feet of King Street. It's a different section.
So that's in section I then, Maren?
Yes.
And that's another proposed amendment that the other neighbor has made, correct? Am I correct about that? Someone? Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's correct. All right, anyone else wish to speak with regard to the amendment to letter H, paragraph A, I?
Christine Nordhaus, Star Hill. I think the problem with building out instead of up is that we get more out and less compact areas. I think when you go through... Oh, sorry, thanks. When you walk down any main street in Massachusetts, you see buildings that are 4 stories tall. It's what they look like. They're commercial buildings and with retail under and commercial over. I think if we don't build up to the 4 stories, then we'll need to build out, which takes up more space. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else wish to speak to that particular amendment?
James Kennedy, 50 Gilson Road. My question is more how, let me move up a little bit. My question has more to do, number one, with the tax impact, having smaller buildings, how would that impact the valuation of the development and the project as a whole, and how would that change the numbers in terms of revenue to the town? The other thing would be, how would the smaller buildings impact the success of this project? We're all in Littleton, we all would love to see this, or most of us would love to see this to be successful and continue to pay our bills in terms of tax revenue. So I'm concerned about how this ties the hands of the developer in terms of making this a very successful project. So I don't know who would answer these questions, but.
Okay, we'll endeavor to get an answer. Someone want to handle that, how that might impact the development? Mr. Glavy, or which one?
Mark, why don't I go first, then you can clean up whatever. No, stick up there. I won't be that long. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I can speak to this aspect of it that I think is being lost somewhere in the discussion of height in terms of both number of stories and the actual height of the buildings, is that I don't believe, and the planning board could certainly speak to this in more detail, perhaps add in the details. I don't believe this number was created in a vacuum, and that it specifically was looking to achieve 2 ends. One is to allow what has been proposed conceptually to happen with the height restrictions. I believe the owner of the property now, the proponent of the development as proposed, has stated it wouldn't be able to work for that property. It would actually be perfect for housing truck terminal bays at a lower height, unfortunately. The other thing that's worth noting, and isn't obvious in the numbers that are presented here, is that the 75-foot figure is actually comparable to the elevation of the current IBM buildings because they are built on a higher plateau, and to the mill building across the street, which we're all familiar with, so that these new buildings, if built, would be consistent with the elevation of the surrounding buildings there. So that, I think, is what was attempted to be achieved somewhat in the way that these numbers were derived at by the planning board. Thank you.
All right, planning board.
So that we're not confused, we're talking about two different areas here. The first one, the one that goes from 35 to 50 feet, is the form-based code area. That's already approved at 35 feet. The reason that we wanted to go a little higher was to give some different dimensions. So that not everything's at 35 feet. Maybe one building, maybe two buildings would be 50 feet. You gotta remember that stretch is 1,100 feet long. So having all 2 or 2.5 story buildings made it look awkward. We're talking about retail on the first floor, office space on the second, and maybe some senior housing or housing on the third floor. Maybe the chance of having atriums in these buildings. That's why we went to the 50 feet there. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the piece in the back. We're talking about the piece that's the form-based coding piece in the front. All we're talking about is making a different kind of landscape as you go down the road. Not all at 35 feet. That's why we wanted 50 there. The 70 feet has to do with the taller building. And if we could get that picture back up, that picture that we showed you was from inside the building looking out. So if you look at that, the lull that's lifted up there, not that one, the picture of out the window. Hold on. Right there. That building, because the IBM buildings, as Paul said, are up on a plateau, the building's the same height as the buildings that you're seeing out there now. The 70 feet is going to be no higher than what's already out there. And the reason you go up, as one of the residents said, is so that you don't have to go wider. We can have more green space. We can keep the Tuttle House. We can keep the pear orchard. We can go up and keep more green space and more area around the buildings to leave it in its natural state. That's why we're asking for 70 feet. But there's two different areas of height differences. Thank you.
Thank you.
One question that wasn't answered quite fully, and that is the impact on the valuation, tax impact. Is there someone who can state that?
Town administrator.
Thank you. Jim, I wish we had an answer on that. I haven't seen a proposed project. I saw renderings, so it's tough to really answer that on the information, the limited information that we have right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, we're on the first proposed amendment to change 4 stories to 2.5 and 50 feet to 35.
Kristen Guichard, 24 Paula Beth Street. I'm just concerned that this amendment would essentially make it really not viable to redevelop with the imagery that we just saw on the screen there, which I think looks like a wonderful walkable town center. I think that the zoning change actually takes into consideration the viewpoint from the pedestrian, so having the higher heights in the back of the site I think is really thoughtful, and I think the way that it's written should stay, and I'm not in support of the amendment.
Yes, sir.
Jared Alpiori. One of the concerns I've got is we're making special exemptions for one piece of property. The purpose of this amendment, as I understand it, particularly the second part with residential, is to keep the heights here in line with everybody else in the town is bound by. You already said that the front part of this is open to mixed use and form-based code, but for some reason that isn't happening. It seems like we're making an awful lot of exemptions for one piece of property. And the question is, why don't we hold this property to the same standards everybody else is held to?
Thank you. Okay, specific to the amendment, sir?
Yes. I just have a question about the 50 feet or 75 feet elevation, which was just mentioned that there is, Greg Stahovic, Foster Street. There's a plateau in this property. Would the 75 feet be from the lower level of the land or from the top of the plateau, or both?
Okay. Thank you for the question.
I'll grab that. I'll grab that one, Mr. Moderator. The proposed housing would be situated, if you look at the shape and the topography of the site, no, Anthony took it away, thanks, buddy. If you look at the housing component, would be in the back site, kind of in, I've heard it referred to as the armpit of the on-ramp to 495. As you come down Great Road onto the northbound ramp, it would be tucked into that area that is currently all parking lot, and the wastewater treatment facility that they currently have on the site is down in that kind of corner, that armpit, if you will. So to answer the previous speaker through you, Mr. Moderator, the shape and topography of the land would lend to that height, even if it were maximized at 75 feet, being at the grade of the existing IBM buildings now and over to the 410 Great Road Mill building as well. So it would fit to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'll spend George Sanders, 672 Great Road, speaking on the amendment. I believe that the height that they have in this article is okay for the simple reason that when we look at the motel that's in the point over there, it's 4 stories. And when you come across the bridge and you look at the buildings on the right as you approach the common area there, they're up real high there. And when you look at the land over here at IBM, there's a big drop there, and you have a lot of trees that's around that area, and that's where they're talking about putting these housing in that area over there. It won't even come up to the height that's the buildings that they're on Great Road there. And I was standing over at Alfano, and I couldn't even see the top of the crane. So I don't think we have an environmental problem. It's not shielding off any sunlight for anybody as a resident on that area. They're going to blend this in, and the thing that I think we're beating the horse to death here is that we got a board here, a planning board, that's going to make sure that the developer does what's right. I mean, let's have a little faith and trust in these people.
All right, thank you. I think we're ready for a vote on the First Amendment, which is to letter H, paragraph A, lowercase I, or number 1, to change maximum height of 4 stories to 2.5 stories, 50 feet to 35 feet. All those in favor of that amendment, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, the amendment fails. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to letter I, paragraph A, maximum building height. The amendment is to change 6 stories to 3 stories, 75 feet to 50 feet, and then in the final line, 4 stories to 3 stories, 60 feet to 50 feet. Okay, does anyone wish to speak to that particular amendment?
My name is Jan Burns, and I live at 553 King Street. It's directly across the street from this development. We're the lucky people that have to look at these buildings until we're forced to move away. We have been living in Littleton for 29 years, raised a family, and there's other residents on King Street that would be affected by the height of these buildings. I know I'm just, one of few, but I object to the development period. What consideration have you given to the residents that live on King Street? I'm going to be looking at a 75-foot building directly across the street from my home. So I'm for this amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, anyone else that wishes to speak to the amendment, Board of Select Board?
Chuck DeCoste, Select Board. through you to the previous speaker, Mr. Moderator. The location of this proposed residential component is going to be set back across the street from the house in question is going to be looking at more of a village common in the Tuttle Orchard. Not exactly sure where 553 King Street lies, but I would offer up that it's, for me personally, looking across at something that looks more developed and more of a common area versus looking at an empty parking lot or empty buildings would be more attractive. The 75-foot component would be in the back where that blue shaded area is, where the cursor is right now. And as mentioned before, it would be situated down lower on the site, so it wouldn't be like to be a 75-foot building up in someone's face. And the other thing to mention is all of the mature growth that is there that wasn't there some 40 years ago when the site was developed is planned to stay where it is, which is another reason for us to keep the height component versus going with a sprawl, to a previous speaker's comments earlier. With sprawl, the Sustainability Committee did offer their opinion, and they voted unanimously to support the existing height in the case that there was an amendment put before the body here tonight. And Sustainability's reasons for that was because more impervious space would not lend to their mission and the goal of keeping as much green space as possible.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak to that specific amendment? Yes, ma'am.
Heather Stimson, 107 Great Road. We keep speaking about where the buildings are going to be situated on the site, but I don't think that there's anything in the bylaw that actually requires them to be situated in the armpit. So if we want to be mindful of kind of both sides of this, could we not adjust the height restriction to be relative to total elevation from sea level, such that it doesn't rise above the current height of the IBM building, regardless of where one chooses to build a residential site?
Planning board?
I would offer that the planning board special permit process will review the relative height of the buildings and would recommend that we leave it up to the planning board to make that determination through the special permit process.
Okay, thank you. We have an amendment before the body. If no one else wishes to speak to it, we'll take a vote on the amendment in letter I, paragraph A, to change 6 stories to 3 stories, 75 feet to 50 feet, and in the final line, 4 stories to 3 stories, and 60 feet to 50 feet. All those in favor of the proposed amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, the amendment fails. And we now are back to the main motion as amended. You'll recall we did amend section 173-232, the introductory paragraph. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the main motion as amended? Yes, sir.
Yes. Bruce Tornell, 20 Harwood Ave. Just in general, a lot of talk about the elevation and the building and the parking lot and all the rest, but there's nothing that really says that they're going to even keep the buildings, right? Or that they don't just get a bulldozer and level the knoll so it's kind of flat. So, I mean, that's a question, I guess. There's nothing that says that they just couldn't do that, right?
Mr. Moderator, through you to the chair. Through you to Mr. Tornell, our previous speaker. There is nothing that dictates that those buildings would be there. The original intent from speaking with this particular developer was to try to repurpose those buildings with, I think, medical use was displayed as one of the possible opportunities. But as far as specifically how that would be repurposed, it's unsure at this point. I would propose that it's probably the most costly thing for him or the developer to raise those buildings and kind of start from scratch, because as the previous speaker had mentioned, there is a great deal of infrastructure there. So I would imagine they would take advantage of the existing buildings, but there is nothing specific to this zoning bylaw that would dictate that. You are correct.
Okay, thank you, because we're getting real specific about, we're getting specific about things, but there's a lot of big things we don't really know. So, and then I had another question, I guess. What's the housing density? I'm sorry, let me take that back. What's the number of housing units in the town as it is? Do we have that number? Anybody know the number of housing units in town?
Town administrator?
Is it on the other slide? Joe, flip it on the other slide.
Try to pull that up for you.
Yep.
3889?
3889.
Okay, so this would add theoretically like another 861 housing units. Theoretically, right? It looks like it could, I think, actually. So anyhow, my point would be, that would be a pretty big percentage increase, let's say 20% or something like that. So whether there's a lot of kids or no kids, or just something to think about as the culture of the community changes, so that, you were there when it happened, for example, not that, geez, it never occurred to me. So that's my only point.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Oh, yes, Select Board, Ms. Napoli.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through the last speaker, I just want to speak to the housing component of this project and the question regarding the number of housing units currently we have in the town of Littleton. Cindy Napoli Select Board. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Littleton Affordable Housing Trust, and I'm Chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I'm also a lifelong resident of Littleton. So one of the things that I think, speaking of housing in Littleton, that many people don't realize is we do not have a diverse housing stock in Littleton. The majority of housing in Littleton are single-family homes. The majority of people that can afford single-family homes in Littleton is limited. By not having a diverse housing stock in Littleton, we are prohibiting our community. We're limiting people of limited means to live in our town. We're prohibiting children who grew up in Littleton to remain here, seniors who build their lives here to stay in our community. And the reason that is because we do not have multi-unit housing. We stopped building apartments. We have very limited multi-unit housing complexes in Littleton, and it's a problem. And it's making Littleton more exclusive. So given that, yes, this rezoning will create additional housing, it's going to create the type of housing that we need for Littleton. There's people that work in Littleton that can't afford to live here. There are school teachers, our first responders, they provide services we rely on every day. They wait on us at the restaurant, or they cook our food. That impacts our community, whether you really think about it or not. So we all think of Littleton as a place where everybody's welcome, right? At one point or another, many people move to this community for one reason or another. You had the opportunity to do that. There are many people that want to live in our community that can't afford to do so because we don't have the housing that they need. We don't offer that range of housing that we need in our community. And so this is one project that will help create that for our town, and it brings opportunity for many people. And it brings opportunity for us as residents as well. I mean, I don't like looking at Littleton Common. Do you? Do you think it's representative of our town? I don't. There's so many things there that we've identified that we want for our town that we're lacking. And this rezoning will help bring all of that to our town. A common area that we can be proud of, that we can walk to, that we can visit with one another. It will bring economic growth and development. It will help offset the cost of the sewer project. It'll fulfill the needs, the vision of the master plan. And we've done a lot of homework to get us to this point. We have, our planning board has worked tirelessly through the Littleton Common Revitalization Roadmap. I don't know how many people in this room have read that report, but it's pretty interesting. We've done form-based code so that whatever we do create in the common is reflective of what we want to represent us as a community. And then we have the housing component to it. The Affordable Housing Trust has come up with concept goals that we've identified for the type of housing and the price ranges that we need to help our community grow and thrive going forward. So I just to the point made about, from the last speaker, about the number of housing units we have in Littleton. Yeah, we have a lot of housing in Littleton, but they're all single-family homes, and we're excluding a lot of people that want to live in our community and be part of our community as well. And this rezoning will help fulfill that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir?
Mr. Moderator, Ed Mullen, Building Commissioner, also 10 Gristmill Road. I just want to speak to the previous speaker's mention of whether the buildings were going to stay or not. It's private property, and the developer has the right to request a building permit for demolition at any time. Zoning can't prevent that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Alicia Day, 28 Westchester Drive, and I'm also the Director for Parks and Recreation. I'd been going back and forth about whether I wanted to come up and speak, but hearing Selectwoman Napoli speak, I felt like it was an important piece that it should be talked about. I started in this position probably about 7 years ago, and the Holiday Helpers Program is something that we've been doing at our department for many years. When I first started, we had somewhere between 80 to 100 families. Over the course of those 7 to 8 years, about 40 of those families have been displaced because they can't afford to live here. So I just really want to put that impact that some of us are very fortunate to be able to be here. Other families had wanted to raise their kids here, and they can't. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Unless there's anyone else wishes to be heard, we can move to a vote on the main motion as printed in the town meeting report and as amended this evening, remembering that it requires a simple majority vote. Yeah, for a while now, yeah. Okay, then have at it.
John Tully, Berry Bush Road. And I've been a resident of Littleton for 50 years now. And over the years, I've attended a lot of these town meetings. One of the things I've learned is be very suspicious when a developer uses the term affordable housing. Because one thing I've seen, it's not affordable by most folks. But this particular proposal and the subdevelopment plan makes me very wary. When you look around the area, what's been developing, what's been growing, I don't know whether everybody is familiar with the massive development that went in back of Nagog Park and the village of Nagog Woods in Acton, just to the east of us, called Avalon. There are 6,000 people in that thing, and it's still growing. But a quarter of the population of the town of Acton. But at least the developer there had to put in their own sewage system, from what I understand. this development, expanded development, and rezoned, if it gets built out, will be hooked into the town sewer system. And while it'll share the cost of it, do we know for sure when it's fully occupied how much of the increased capacity of the expanded system will be used and depleted by this system? That happened in Chelmsford, from what I understand, when they expanded their sewer system, and expanded development forced them to go back to the drawing board and further expand it before they were even completed. So we might be faced with further expense. And so I'm very concerned with this development as it's proposed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear now from the General Manager of the Light and Water Department, Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. With regards to that question specifically about the capacity, we're actually fortunate this developer has come to our community to support this project. We couldn't afford it before they were here. That cost was going to fall squarely on the residents of this community with some help from the businesses. The costs were high. You guys have seen us talk about this for years now. With regards to the capacity, this developer is looking at about 120,000 gallons per day. The discharge site, which is our #1 limiting factor, is about 330,000 gallons per day. The whole needs assessment that CDM Smith did for us, the holistic view of the community, identified about 180,000 gallons of potential sewering needs in Littleton. So no, this does not choke off our future needs. Actually, it works compatible with where the department likes to go with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, we're discussing the main motion as amended. Yes, ma'am.
Jen Stack, 40 Bulkley Road. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I just want to say that I do appreciate all the work that the various boards have done on this. I have serious hesitations, and I guess it comes down to sort of trying to build a plane while we're flying it. And I feel like there are a lot of factors in this town that we really need to be paying attention to, like traffic on our main roads, traffic on our side roads, like our schools. And I kind of take issue with the concept that it's an either or. It's either warehouses or it's this reconstituted mixed use. And I know that, one thing that's sort of bubbling up is that we have a couple of schools that are going to need some attention and some love. And we don't really have any place in town to go with a big new school space. And I want to point that out to this body because I think that we really need to be considering some of these longer term things that we need to do. And the senior center, thank you very much, and the senior center. There are a lot of things that we've been talking about, and we know that our schools are full. We know that Shaker Lane is in dire need of assistance and support. We know that there's no space on the existing site for that. So I do take issue with it's either warehouses or it's this plan. And I do think that there's room for a conversation around how else this land could be used to benefit our town. I know that it's privately held. I do understand that. I also think it's a little bit disingenuous to just keep beating the drum of senior housing and affordable housing. And so, Mr. Moderator, through you to Select Person Napoli, what's our percentage of affordable housing in the town right now, and what's our mandate from the state?
Okay. Ms. Napoli?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To the Speaker. So currently, the percentage of affordable housing in Littleton is over the state's threshold. I think it's about, we're at like 12.9% maybe. But I would like to emphasize that that's just a number.
That was my question, thank you. Cindy, we know, that was my question.
No,
Would you like to,
if I may,
yes,
Mr. Moderator,
go
thank
ahead.
you.
Yes.
Just to clarify, a lot of people might not understand what exactly that question means. So that's just a number that's mandated by the state. It doesn't necessarily mean that it meets the needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, I just have one more point, if I may. I think that this is an opportunity for us as a town to decide how many more developments like this we want. And I think that once we open the door to extremely dense housing, we have put out a sign that we're open for business. And we know there are plots of land in this town that other developers have their eyes on. And I think that once you say yes, it's really hard to say no the next time. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Amy Tarlo Lewis at 3 Omega Way. So I just have a question. Is it appropriate to propose an amendment about a special permit with regards to carbon emissions in new buildings?
I'll defer to council on this, I think, because it was not part of the bylaw as printed in the warrant. It is not, but council, can you amplify that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Harrington, Town Council. So I was asked this question this morning about adding the Brookline energy model to this bylaw. And in my opinion, because this bylaw never identified energy as a consideration that it would be outside the four corners, to add it now. I would add to that as just further counsel. So, and by way of full disclosure, so my law firm assisted the residents of Brookline to draft that amendment that you're talking about, and it has not been approved by the Attorney General yet. And that's important, and it's not that we don't think it's going to be approved by the Attorney General, but until it is, and remember in Brookline it's more of a standalone feature, until the Attorney General acts on it, it would not be my advice to insert it into kind of a packaged zoning bylaw amendment that's before you tonight. It could, you could end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater on this one by putting an amendment in. Either the Attorney General just removes the amendment or she attacks the whole bylaw, and I don't think we want her to attack the whole bylaw. So just having worked with the attorneys in my firm who participated in the process in Brookline, I think that's a process that you want to take and socialize and kind of work to build maybe for the annual town meeting so that you're doing it right and you're putting in the appropriate language to give the Attorney General the opportunity to approve it, because you're really cutting new ground here, and you got to be really careful. So, and I think it's difficult to do that as an amendment. That would be my advice.
So what guarantees would we have in terms of our existing bylaws to make sure that this developer is meeting carbon emission goals that are set up by the state for 2030 and 2050 as the planet's burning to the ground right now as we speak? Seriously, like what are they going to do to make sure it's like as carbon neutral as they can make it?
Would you like me to handle that?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Development of this scale would be going through MEPA review at the state level, and a gas emissions study is required at that point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard before we take a vote?
Mr. Moderator, I just also want to, on the energy efficiency, Ed Mullen again, Building Commissioner. The building code also requires them to meet the standards for the 2015 building code, which has significant energy efficiencies required. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Unless, okay. Are there additional people that want to be heard? Because I'd like you to get in line rather than, I can't tell who's in line. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jillian Huffningel. I live at 58 Spectacle Pond Road, Littleton, class of 2000. Woo woo. Took me 20 years to move back here. I couldn't afford to live here. 20 years. I am a proud resident again. Very lucky, very lucky. So I'm genuinely curious. If you look at page 31, section 173233, under section A, item C, the requirements of 173221J may be waived by the planning board at its discretion. I don't know what that means because it's not listed in the pamphlet. So could someone educate us on what 173221J is?
Okay, thank you. Planning board?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Off the top of my head, I'm not going to recall that exact section, but what this does is refers back to form-based code that's been adopted and provides waiver for only these 3 different sections.
Could you clarify what the waiver is?
We'll look that up. Thank you.
Well, we're being asked to vote on it, so we should probably understand it.
Yeah, if you give me 5 minutes, I'll be happy to look it up. Thank you. But there are 3 sections of form-based code that would that the planning board would be allowed to waive under the proposed bylaw.
I think others would like to hear too.
Okay, is that your comment?
I'll take a shot at it real quick for you. You're not voting on the form-based code. Form-based code is already in place. This number B, number C, requirements 173, 222, I believe has to do with the floor-to-floor requirements for the form-based code and the few up above it. It has nothing to do with the apartments or anything else like that. It's just how we're going to build out the form-based code. So that's
But it doesn't necessarily define what the board has at its discretion to determine whether or not they're going to waive.
Could you say that again?
So it says that it can be waived by the planning board at its discretion. It specifically states it can be waived by the planning board at its discretion, but it doesn't define what can be waived.
It's the interior dimensions of form-based coding. If you look at A, B, and C up above it, form-based coding. It's so that it gives you more flexibility on the inside of the buildings. Maybe we put an atrium in there and we waive the height, floor to walls, floor to height ceilings and things like that. Normally in a special permit, a master plan special permit, the planning board has asked different design criteria, and this makes sure that we have the ability to look at certain specifics. We can't tell you what the specific may be right now. There's no project in front of us right now, but it gives us the right to take a look at it and waive it if we deem it necessary. We're not going to just waive certain things just for the sake of waiving it. It gives us the purview to waive them. But this is form-based coding. This zoning is already in place there. When you're not asking you to add zoning to it, it's already there. It's the form-based coding part of the project that's already there, for the 255 feet of frontage that's already there for the mixed-use buildings.
Okay, I'm going to go to the assistant town administrator who has the section of the code open.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So pertaining to the question, what is specifically waived, the Article C that you quoted, requirements of section 173-122.1.JA, those are specifically regarding building standards. That section is entitled Use Standards, and it talks about occupation of a floor space by different permitted uses is limited or restricted for buildings dependent on their position on the lot. And then it goes on to talk about building calculations based on the amount of frontage, how much space is then measured towards the facade, and what can and can't be considered residential or non-residential space. Any other building on a lot that does not contribute towards frontage build-out is restricted to only residential uses. Those two provisions which were within the form-based code, as Mark said, that's existing language. Waivers are being sought in this bylaw proposal because while it's relying on many of the standards of form-based code, there are some specific standards that, because it's such a larger site and the way that the planning board through the special permit process could grant some flexibility. By granting those waivers so it doesn't specifically address this standard, helps the planning board achieve a better design, better mix of uses, and again, it can all be done and controlled through the special permit process.
Okay.
Thank you. So to clarify, that includes section AI, I, double I, triple I, and, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that includes everything we discussed earlier about the 4 stories, 50 feet, 2.5 stories, 35 feet, 3 stories, 50 feet. That's all included in a potential waiver?
No, that is not.
Okay, because that's what the prior speaker said. It referred to section A above. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have our answer. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard? Yes, sir.
Michael Albertelli, 21 Moore Lane. I just have a question about transportation to and from other places in the town. It seems to me that there would be easy, at least walking transportation to the center of town, but what about things like sidewalks to the point, making that easily accessible?
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to tackle that?
I'm prepared.
All right. Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I guess I'm as well qualified as anyone to speak what we've heard anecdotally anyways, or in conversation with the new owner of the property, that they're very much interested. And in fact, both Mr. Park, the developer of the Point, and Mr. Lopoli, the owner of the 550 King Street, have expressed an interest in working together to promote their mutual interests, and that logically includes having pedestrian transportation, sidewalking, better sidewalking across 495 from one to the other. And as you pointed out, as the speaker pointed out, there's a lot of opportunity that has been embraced by Lopoli companies to have the existing property, one, maintain existing trails and the physical amenities in terms of the orchard and the trees, but also to stated intent to develop something that will flow into the common so that the walking and shopping public feel at ease moving from that property to the other properties in the common area. And then finally, I would say that the previous bus service to the train station has been promised to either be maintained or I would guess be resumed and potentially expanded. So a lot of those transportation options have been discussed, and I assume will be fleshed out in more concrete detail during the planning board permit process.
All right. Thank you. Okay, last two. Yes, sir.
Hi, Alex Yaganoff, 141 Goldsmith Street. So I wanted to ask a few questions about the affordability. Specifically, I have a few questions. Just 10 years ago, my wife and I were exactly in a situation where we wanted to stay in town, but we couldn't really afford it. So since we're being told that this housing is going to be affordable, I wanted to find out specifics. How many housing units are going to be specifically designated for seniors? How many housing units are going to be designated to be affordable? What does it mean to be affordable?
Okay, thank you. Planning board.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, we do not have in front of us a specific development proposal. We have a zoning bylaw amendment that's proposed. We know that we do have inclusionary zoning in our bylaw, and this would have to comply with that. So a minimum of 10% of the units would be affordable, capital A affordable, at 80% AMI or lower. The rest of the units, as far as when the development proposal comes in and the planning board reviews that, that's information that they will have at that time.
Could you clarify the 80%? I couldn't hear. What you said, 80% of what?
Excuse me, AMI, area median income.
So as far as I know, I looked up information up a few years ago, median income in Littleton is $100,000. If I'm a young family, I just graduated, I don't think my wife or I would be hitting that point. I'm not talking about specifically myself, but just somebody. That's not something that's affordable to them. I don't see anything that indicates that we're going to be keeping the price down to make it affordable. So the whole argument of people who are cleaning our dishes or waiters would be able to afford living here doesn't seem to be actually a reality. Is that the case?
I understand the question. Big picture, the planning board is proposing a zoning bylaw amendment that allows multifamily units. Right now, by right, you can only build single-family homes. We've gotten really good at producing 800,000 to million plus colonials on 1 acre lots. This zoning bylaw proposes something different.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Last one. Yes, ma'am.
Erica Pagani, 6 Fox Lane. I just want to say that I think this is a great idea. I love the idea of the mixed use. You know, the sketches look great. And the concerns I'm hearing tonight aren't so much about we don't want mixed use. It's about, is it really going to be affordable? You know, and is it going to be green? What about our schools? So a couple of things. First of all, I just want to know if this isn't the time to be able to talk about how we make sure that it's a green building, and if this isn't the time to make sure we can say we want units that are actually affordable and we want a number of units that are affordable, when is that time? So when will we have more say in what we can, so that we can make it what's right for Littleton? And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the schools, because I agree that, you know, the demographics across the state are going down, but as Mr. Fontanella alluded to, in highly sought after districts, right, people want to live here. I happen to also teach in a highly sought after district, and our numbers are going up all the time. So while I don't think we should be making any moves to restrict families from moving in here, because I think everyone deserves a great education, I do think we need to be planning for the future, and I do think we need to be looking at our schools and making a plan.
Thank you. Planning board?
Mr. Moderator, one last thing to piggyback on what Ms. Napoli had to say. The people that are in this auditorium are lucky. They can afford to live in Littleton. We're losing the middle part of Littleton. The first-time home buyers, the workforce housing, they can't afford $1 million. We have 3 projects in Littleton right now. The asking prices for all the houses are $1 million. If we don't put higher density, we're not going to be able to have seniors live here. We're not going to have people that graduate from high school and have to wait 20 years to move here. They're never going to be able to afford Littleton. As far as the density and the affordability, if you want to talk about that, when the developer actually has a project in front of us, please come to the planning board meetings and tell us what you want. We're going to try to get as much affordable out of the developer as we can. But until we have them in front of us and hold their feet to the fire as to what we want and how much affordable, we're tied to the state AMIs. The seniors, for 15 years, the seniors have been coming to our planning board meeting begging us to give some sort of age-in-place affordability for them. They have no place to go. They sell their houses. They can't live in Littleton. This is the first shot that we've had to change the way Littleton has been, the way we're going. Another couple of years, no one from Littleton, no one who graduates from Littleton will be able to live here. And if we don't do it something now, then we're going to lose this opportunity, because we're going to have a big box up there. Walmart or somebody like that is going to buy it, because that's what it's zoned for. If we don't rezone it, that's what you're going to get. And if you want to come and tell us what to do, come to our planning board meetings and please tell us what you want. Yeah. Thank you.
So I would just like to say I agree with everything you just said. I just wanted to know when the right time was to talk about that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We're now going to move to a vote. All right, we'll move to a vote on the main motion under Article 11, as printed in your town meeting report and as amended earlier this evening. And this requires a simple majority because the state rules for zoning changes with a housing component have changed to a majority vote rather than a two-thirds vote. So all those in favor of the main motion as printed and as amended signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed? Okay, I declare it to be better than a two-thirds vote, and the motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, we will move
Stick around, we got a sewer to vote on.
to Article 12. There's a revised motion for Article 12 on your green update sheet. So I will read that to you. Moved and seconded by the Select Board and Board of Water Commissioners that the town appropriate $25 million to pay costs of constructing the Littleton sewer system expansion, Littleton Common Area, and for the payment of all other costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 1, Section 8, Paragraph 14, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. Any and all portion of the borrowing authorized by this vote may be obtained through the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, the trust, in accordance with Mass General Law, Section 29C, as amended, and the treasurer, Select Board, or any other town official or officials, as the Select Board may designate, are authorized to file for and accept any financing and financial assistance for the project that may be available to the town from the trust or from any other sources. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. The Select Board and any other appropriate officials or boards of this town are authorized to assess and collect betterments and/or assessments to offset the costs of this project. And you'll see that the Select Board, Finance Committee, Board of Water Commissioners have voted to support this article. There is a presentation that the Water Commissioners will undertake now. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name's Jim Carr. I'm the chairman of the Light and Water Commissioners. Tonight we've heard questions about the sewer and the expansion of the sewer and the existing sewer. Tonight we're going to hear from Nick Lawler, he's the general manager for Light and Water, and Alicia Benjamin, who is the finance director from town. They'll get those questions answered that we heard earlier. What's it going to be, the impact on taxes, how much is it going to cost, and will it impact me if I don't use it? So we're going to go through this presentation. If anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to answer afterwards. Nick?
It looks like the moderator has a shot clock up on me already, but it's a truly important project for the community. It's one that was done collaboratively through the finance team, the finance committee, select board, and the commissioners, and one that I was truly grateful to be part of. The cover slide says it all. This is really an expansion. We have an existing sewer system. It's a story we failed to tell quite a bit. That sewer system is coming to end of life. This is a very important project for us. Plan, design, and build. Yeah, that sounds easy, right? Well, I think this is something you guys have been supporting and hearing about for about 20 years. I think Paul Glavy's been through, I don't know how many different terms on the select board through those 20 years trying to support this project. It's one that the select board started, turned over to us. It's one that started as an environmental project. The common is in a very special area for our Beaverbrook wells. It's now within Zone 2. With the growth in the community, we've expanded the withdrawal from Beaverbrook, which puts that in Zone 2. It's important to keep the nitrates out of that area. Some of the engineering that we've done, and it's been supported by town meeting over and over and over again, some of these requests, but back in 2020, we did a complete holistic view of the sewering needs of the community to try to figure out how to design and build this project moving forward. We didn't want to have to start a project now on an expansion and have to redo it again 20 years from now. So CDM Smith, who's here tonight to answer any technical questions, if there are any, did do that holistic view and identified 4 areas in town to sewer. Now, those areas can change over time, but that was really what they had looked at as 4 crucial areas, the common being a top priority. We've had several forums and meetings, and it's something we've been discussing publicly for many years now. And this question got asked at the last article. These are the 4, next slide, Joe. Yep, thanks. These are the 4 areas identified. I know they're hard to read on this map, but the number I want to point you towards is the 180,000 gallons per day. If we were to sewer the needs as identified in that plan, we would need 180,000 gallons per day in the discharge and treatment capability. 1A, that's the common. As you can see, there's 32,000 gallons per day there. That includes the town buildings. And then the estimated build-outs were our engineers working closely with CDM Smith and the town planner trying to figure out, what's expected to be built out throughout those zones. So as you guys know, I don't know if it was last time, I lose track of time, I don't know if it was last time meeting, the one before that, you guys approved the construction authorization to build the discharge site. That discharge site we're in the process of designing that for 175 gallons per day because that's what the needs assessment told us to design that at. Now, with that in mind, we knew there could be future build-out, and some of the work that was done by Chris Stoddard and Weston and Sampson prior to us getting it, it looks like the discharge site could support over 300,000 gallons per day. So in that design, we were carving out future areas to maximize the discharge site, which is right here at the high school. So you can see the blue areas, that's where we were gonna build the 175,000 gallons per day. The green columns in between those 2 blue areas, that would allow us to get up over 200,000 gallons per day, which supports 120,000 gallons for the new development at 550 King Street, and also supports the existing needs. And then the 2 green reserve areas, so for future build-out, would allow us to get to 313,000 gallons per day, which would support the 550 King Street and the future build-outs of all 4 phases. This is a number that got made pretty public maybe 3 months ago, $39 million, almost $40 million. This number, all this was basically a loan application to the state. We're trying to get SRF funds similar to what we did for Wickham Ave. This was a high estimate just to try to make sure, whenever you're applying for these state grants, you want to make sure you overshoot to make sure you get the money you need for the project. This number now is down to $25 million. We were working closely with CDM Smith to try to identify which parts of the project we could reduce and what the real numbers were. But I just wanted to touch upon that because I know that number was made public. This slide here talks about a presentation that was held between the select board and the commissioners and all the different scenarios that were presented to them back in March. And the point of the slide is to show that no matter what we did as a community, we had to spend money to support the existing infrastructure. And $6.5 million estimate on scenario A1 was to replace the existing system here at the school. And $13.35 million was to move that system to 242 King Street, which we had purchased as a potential site. And it goes all the way on, scenario B is adding capacity to it. Scenario C is eventually what we planned on designing and building, which was 242 King Street with the infrastructure to support the wastewater flows in the common. And this obviously changed as soon as we heard 550 King Street was potential in August. These are the numbers. I know they're hard to read, but the point I want to make here is the opinion of probable cost that was given to us is about $15.5 million, but that we're early in design. There's a lot of still contingencies out there. So there's a 25% contingency, and there's a construction contingency, a 10% project contingency, and 10% engineering. So when you carry these numbers out, it ends up being $25 million. We feel it to be a very conservative number, a number that we can get in under. And there's also some possibility for grants to help lower that number down further. We feel like we can get a MassWorks grant of $6 million. MassWorks team supports projects that have both housing and mixed-use business. And based off our calculations, we feel that that's an appropriate assumption. It is an assumption. And then there's the American Rescue Plan Act monies that are already in the town that the select board controls, that they can utilize some of the money to offset this project. And again, this slide shows those numbers again. Maybe you can actually read them this time. And the big takeaway here is that the town was most likely on the hook if we were to replace the project for $6.5 to $13 million, deciding how we were going to do it. And adding in 550 King Street, the majority of that cost gets shifted to the businesses. This was a project that if we build it, they will come. Well, now they're here, and they can support the project that we need to also support our own needs. We think the betterment will be under $1 million for the town of Littleton. And this is a question that we get asked a lot. And what's the betterment going to be for us, for the users? And this is we've hired a financial analyst to help us deal with this. And this is really a first look at that. But the numbers that I think that you guys should key in on is the town of Littleton, assuming 100% opt-in. So remember, residential customers have the ability to opt in or out, which you won't get 100%, but this is a range. And those grant monies that we showed you, the town of Littleton would be on the hook for $250,000. Assuming a 50% opt-in, which we feel is a much better assumption, and no grant monies, and it would be on the hook for about $750,000. So to us, this was a great option for the town to move forward in. And then below that, you have the annual payments. And the next slide just kind of shows it graphically. And I left 2 minutes for Alicia, who did most of the work, so I'll give it to her.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, citizens, tonight. I'm going to go over, I know I heard a lot about the finance, so if you could go to the next slide, please. So as the town administrator said earlier, the total value at IBM is $65 million, which equates to $1.8 million in taxes currently. Next slide, please. If IBM, which they are going to do, vacates, that value drops to $38 million. What does that mean to you? That means $767,517 tax loss now gets shifted to the residential class. Next slide, please. So what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my tax bill? As stated earlier, about $130 on top of the 2.5% would be on your tax bill. But since you passed the rezoning, in about 2 to 4 years, that $130 that would be on your tax bill will fall off. This one is just showing the same thing that Nick had said earlier, that the $6.5 to the $13 million that you would have been on the hook for had we not passed it. But because you passed the rezoning, 78% would go to 550 King Street, 5% would go to the town, and 17% would go to the commercial and residential, which would be less than $1 million that would go for the town. Oh, you can go to the next slide. What this slide is showing is how much will be invested each phase. So phase 1, $175 million, phase 2, $80 million, phase 3, about $125 million, and that the height is about the same height as the existing IBM facility. And also, IBM didn't have much personal property, so we may be able to get some personal property valuation from this new rezoning, which will also help the tax base. So based on our $80 million to $115 million plans that we received, we would either get the taxes back to pre-vacancy levels for IBM, or in the higher end, we could get $687,914 over pre-vacancy levels, which would greatly help the town. That would be in addition to, like I said, any personal property or any new growth. Next slide, please. So in conclusion with Nick, the project timing is right. It does not interfere with future sewer goals. I'll let Nick talk to environmental impact.
Right, and then we touched on that. This is a very critical area for our Zone 2. It's a tight area for septics. This is great to get that wastewater out of Zone 2. It's financially feasible for the first time. I've dreaded pitching this project to town meeting and to the FinCom for years because the finances were tough. A lot of it was going to ride on the shoulders of the taxpayers. That's not the case now. This really is the users are going to pay for this. And you'll see, if you look back at the slides that had the cost, a big part of this cost shifts to 550 King Street, large part of it. It's about 80%, like Alicia said. So it's great to bring a project forward on those terms. The grant opportunities, we've seen this with the discharge site. We had a MassWorks grant. We really need a borrowing authorization to leverage ourselves both locally at the state level and also federally to get grants. This isn't saying we're going to get grants, but with that borrowing authorization in hand, with design plans that are almost done, we're hoping to have design plans done by May or June of next year. You almost have a shovel-ready project, but the state and the federal government want to support, and that's how you get grants. This is an older slide. It shows the split from 100% to 60-20-20. It's actually more than that. Alicia touched on that in her slide. You want to touch on the tax revenue?
It's really 78, 17, 5 since we first started out. So me and Nick, as you can see from that 60-20-20, we've been working pretty hard with all the different costing scenarios we've been going through. It increases new growth, and with that new growth, we could offset some of our costs with that if we so decided. It increases our local receipts through building permit revenue, and the borrowing will be 100% repaid through betterment assessments and user charges instead of through your taxes, which I'm sure will put many smiles on people's faces. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Just reminding folks, this is a borrowing authorization, so it ultimately will require a 2/3 vote. Is there anyone who wishes to speak regarding Article 12? If you do, please come to the microphone. Yes, sir.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something here tonight that is very important for you to understand. On Straight Talk, on the cable television, I told you there was a program that the commission was trying to avoid having taxpayers to chip in. Well, Nick did a great job because it was up to 27.6. In 2018, you passed the smart sewer system with 27 million. We was only 6 million over, and the engineers worked this out. They was up to 28.5 previous in this report for the town meeting, and they dropped 3.5 million, so it's down to 25. Let me tell you a little bit else about this here. The state received $5.3 billion on the American Rescue Act, which is primary for the water treatment system and also the sewer system. I sent a letter to the governor and to all the leaders in the legislature and asked them to put $10 million aside for Littleton for the treatment system. I talked to Jamie Eldred. He said that they weren't going to earmark any money, but you would have to come in with a specific item that you want. So I told Nick, get the pen to start it right, because we need more money, and we should be able to get more money for the water treatment system. And we should be able to get money for the sewer treatment system. This is money that is already in the bank. Laura Trahan, she sent $3,25,000 direct to Littleton. I wrote to her, and I wrote to Elizabeth Warren and to Ed Mark and told them, stick their hand in that bucket up there and get all the money they can out of that poke barrel and send it here to Littleton and to the state. Along with the other representatives, they did that. While you sleeping at night, I'm upright. It's the squeaky wheel that get the grease. And I'm always, and I sent a letter to the Mass DOT about the bridge here crossing 495. You got a bottleneck on the eastbound crossing that bridge. So I told them that we need a new bridge with 4 lanes, 2 bike lanes, and 2 sidewalks. So make no mistake about it, I'm doing my homework because I like doing this kind of stuff. And I'm always looking for Littleton and getting what I can for Littleton. Mr. Moderator, my time is out, but that's the name of the game. Let's get what we can.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Just a couple of questions and comments. First of all, the system's been scaled back from the smart sewering. Isn't it just straight wastewater treatment now?
If you're talking about the Clean Water Energy Resource Center, at this time, this design does not have those components in it. This authorization isn't asking for that. This is a standard wastewater treatment plant with membrane technology.
Super. Is there any possibility for any of this water to be recycled as irrigation water for the local farms? Seems a waste to have to go through all the effort of processing it to just put it back on the ground.
Sure, I would say it's a possibility. Again, that's not necessarily part of this authorization. The membrane technology is state-of-the-art, and that will give us that ability to do that. It comes at a cost.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad. I hope you guys are flushed with success.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, yes, sir.
Mark Rambacher, 205 Hartwell. I just have a couple questions. With the 550 King Street not being out for a couple years, and what guarantees do we actually have that they're going to come through with the amount of money that we think they're going to? And what guarantees do we have that the water department or sewer department or whatever isn't going to issue the equivalent of TIFs to people for the betterment to say, well, if you sign up, we'll give you a discount like we do with our taxes? Is there any guarantees we have against those? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So, yeah, two questions. The first being the guarantees of 550 King Street being there. And that was a huge question for the Board of Water Commissioners, and which is why they worked closely with the developer. The developer let them know they were interested in connecting to sewer, but the commissioners took a vote, a unanimous vote, to expand the district onto that parcel of land. And commercial properties don't have the right to opt in or opt out. They're opted in. So it was a great move by the Water Commissioners to recognize that at this moment we have a willing partner, so we're going to take that opportunity to make sure they're in the district. And with regards to TIF, I'll turn it over to the chairman, but I don't think that's something the Water Commissioners do.
We don't do it, and nor will we on a utility.
Yeah, I don't even think we can. I think betterments legally have to be charged proportionally, fairly across the users. So I'm not even sure it's legally can be done. But I've never seen, I've been there 20 years and the commissioners have never done something like that.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Lisa Winter, 17 Westchester Drive. I noticed you guys were handing out a few pages of information, and I was just looking over the charts on the second page, which include estimated betterment and connection fees with the higher and low ranges. I was wondering what the variability in the connection fees was due to. Because it looks like if everyone is rated at like the low, you get a total of around 8 million. And I know the projected recovery, I think, is supposed to be around 20 in total. But I see if you, for instance, 550 King Street comes in at 20 million alone on the high. So just wondering what's driving the variability in those figures. And then the second question is, what's the expected timeline for repayment of the, whatever the bond would be?
Thank you through the moderator to the citizen. So there are different contingencies in there, and those are averages. Those are not in the aggregate. So that's why you're going to see some variability. Those are also assumptions in there based on whether you're going to have grant funding or no grant funding. And for your second question, it's 30 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no one else that wishes to speak to the article, we can move to a vote, remembering that it requires a 2/3 majority because it's a borrowing authorization. I'd like to attempt to get this on a voice vote. If we can't do that, we can go to a hand count or some other method, but why don't we see if we can get that voice vote. And again, the motion is on the green sheet under Article 12. So all those in favor of the motion on the update sheet for Article 12 as written, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? I declare it to be a unanimous vote and passes by the necessary 2/3. All right. All right. Thank you very much. Doing a lot of business tonight. Well, if you've been keeping score, you know we have one more article to go, which is the proposed rezoning of 25 Robinson Road as proposed by the planning board. They do have a presentation. It's been moved and seconded by the planning board that the town vote to approve Article 14 as printed in the warrant. And if the planning board could report first on their public hearing and then make their presentation, that would be great. Again, this is Article 14, rezoning of Robinson Road. If you have to leave, please do so quietly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On behalf of the Planning Board, they held their public hearing on October 7th and recommended that the town meeting support rezoning of 25 Robinson Road. The 25 Robinson Road site is now vacant. Northern Bank owns 5 parcels in Littleton Common, including 25 Robinson Road. Town sewer benefits from redevelopment in Littleton Common, and a small tax burden shift from the loss of market value of underutilized buildings can be addressed by a comprehensive redevelopment of this site. What could a new development at 25 Robinson Road and the adjacent parcels owned by Northern Bank, what could it look like? Northern Bank did prepare an overview of what the development could look like and provided sketches of some of the buildings that they're hoping to propose to the planning board. At this point, open for questions, unless you had anything else to add, Mark.
If I could get Mr. Montanari to report on the planning board's public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We held a public meeting on this on October 7th, and we voted to send it to for town meeting approval. I just want to add that this is an extension of the form-based coding that we passed 2 years ago. This parcel was on the form-based coding. It was a little confusing at the time, so it was the thought of the planning board to not include it back then, the town meeting 2 years ago. We are bringing it back now because it's a vital part to the revitalization of the common area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the proposed rezoning of Robinson Road? Okay, we've got someone coming to the microphone. Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Carter, 28 Robinson Road. Lived on Robinson Road for almost 25 years now. We have a very strong community there on the street, lots of kids, lots of new families. And we're concerned about the fact that there's property there, it's a home that now is being rezoned for parking for industrial use, and what the impact will have with an already congested street from the dentist office there. If any of you go to that dentist or have gone down Robinson Road, it's always hard to take a left-hand turn out of there. The dentist patients all park in parallel on Robinson Road. And so there's plans for both a curb cut onto Robinson Road, as well as taking down that residential property and making it a parking lot, which we're concerned about, again, from traffic standpoint, air pollution, or light pollution rather, and noise pollution. So I just think everybody needs to pause for a minute and realize that, there's concern over a development similar to King Street, right? Where there's residents that are impacted that are right near there, next to commercial zoning, and then suddenly the planning board comes in and says, well, we can take this house or approve this being rezoned, when in fact, with the housing market being what it is right now, if the bank had allowed that to go up, I'm sure it would have sold and a family would have moved in. So those are my comments, and I know there are other residents that share those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Do I have to take my mask off?
Yes,
Okay,
you can.
sorry. Lauren Borba, 29 Robinson Road. I also live on Robinson Road, where 25 Robinson Road is being proposed to be rezoned. Not stated in this warrant. Essentially, the intent is to tear down the single-family home. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. He was just saying he couldn't hear me. So the intent of the rezoning is to tear down the single-family home to put in a parking lot. Some facts that you should consider is that if this property does get torn down, 50% of our linear road will turn into commercial. 50%. We have single-family homes with, great yards on this street, and for 50% of that linear road to become commercial, due to the fact that you are now tearing down a single-family home. This is a single-family home that's been around since the early 1900s. This home has housed many families. I knew one of them really well. And the bank bought it about 4 years ago. It has been vacant ever since, with the intention to turn it into a parking lot. The other thing I would also like to point out is that Northern Bank has 2.8 acres of commercially zoned property. They can absolutely put in a parking lot within that 2.8 acres. Why they're tearing down a single-family home to put in a parking lot is just beyond me. I think as a town, personally, I think that we need to hold sacred our single-family homes and our neighborhoods. If you vote yes for this, you are tearing down a single-family home in the middle of a densely populated, kid-friendly, dead-end neighborhood. If you wouldn't do this in your backyard, I urge you to vote no on this, because really, I think that the bank absolutely can work within their 2.8 acres to make this beautiful property come to life. This is not saying no to the development. They have the property to develop. What this is saying no to is that you cannot tear down a house to put in a parking lot in our town that we love. So that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard regarding Article 14? Okay, yes, sir?
Mr. Moderator, Ed Mullen, Building Commissioner. It's private property. Whether we'd like to save the house or not, the owner has the right to request a permit to demolition the house at any time. Just a point of fact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no one else that wishes to be heard, we can move to a vote. I'll remind you that this is a rezoning that does require a 2/3 vote because it doesn't involve a housing component. Yes. All right, Select Board has a comment to make.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the Select Board has worked pretty closely with this developer and has worked very closely with the neighbors. And we've been out to that site multiple times to ask the neighbors what they wanted. The original zoning, or the original plans for the bank location, which is down where the Colonial Gardens is now, down at the kind of the point where Robinson Road meets Great Road. The bank would be relocated from its existing 1970s building, which is up next to the old DCU building and Welch Automotive, would be moved down to that kind of point of the spear there at the end of Robinson and Great Road. The bank was proposing a drive-through that would exit onto Robinson Road, and the neighbors were very much opposed to that. And so in order to accommodate the neighbors' wishes, the bank had proposed to do a drive-through which would come in from Great Road on the other side of this structure here, and then turn right, and then by using the land that they did purchase 4 or so years ago, to be able to have the swing width in a parking area to create a safe drive-through area for the bank. This particular parcel, when it was purchased by the bank, was proposed to be part of this form-based code. It was kind of a late change by the planning board to take that off of the original plan, so I believe it's a bit of a cleanup to put this back in order to get the maximum benefit of the development and to maintain a lot of the green space. This house would be raised from its existing capacity, and it would in fact be much of it would be a parking area, but all of the neighbors met with myself, the town administrator, other select board members, planning board members, as well as many members of the bank, and met with the neighbors and found out what they wanted, and the neighbors were inclined to go along with what the bank wanted. So the proposal that is in front of us now is supporting what it is that the neighbors wanted, which would be much more green space, an extension of a wall. There is commercial property that abuts much of Robinson Road currently. The town does own 12 Robinson Road, which is on the opposite side of where the bank is located in this rendering, which we have no idea what we're going to do with that. But right now, that is a vacant home or farmhouse, which could be put out to bid, and we could do something with that. But the dentist is down the other end in the cul-de-sac, and I think that with this development, with this change, allowing for that swing and putting some sort of an earthen berm and some green space would be what was conveyed to the bank, the best use of that property in order to create the safest alternative for the bank and for this proposed development as a whole.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone else wish to be heard? Otherwise, we'll proceed with the vote. You've spoken once on this article. Do you have some new information? Okay. Well, I'll allow it, but this will be it.
Thank you. Yes. To confirm, the neighbors have met with the board. The one thing that I do want to contest that Mr. Chuck DeCoste just implied is that the neighbors are in agreement to this. What I would like to suggest to you is you have now heard from 2 of the neighbors in opposition from this. You have not heard from anyone in support of this. We have neighbors who had to go home to their young children. Tonight was going very long, who are also in opposition. So I just want to make sure that there's not a blanketed assumption that there is an agreement in a mass form for this neighborhood for this. So just want to make sure that you are implying that there was full support. I would, very much object to that. So.
All right, thank you. Planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. One last thing before we vote on this. The reason that the planning board is supporting this is because the residents didn't want any traffic on Robinson Road. We saw 3 different renderings of putting the bank in, and 2 of the 3 had the exit from the drive-through onto Robinson Road, which is the town way, which the bank has every right to do. This third proposal, which takes the green space, takes the house, loops the drive-through back onto its own property to come out on Great Road. So it wasn't an accommodation. We are trying to make an accommodation to all the residents on Robinson Road that there would be no increased traffic on it. The bank has every right to put a drive-through in, and it would exit on Robinson Road. By doing this, it doesn't exit on Robinson Road. Most of the lots that are on Great Road that butt up to Robinson Road are a couple hundred feet deep. The area we're talking about where that triangle is 97 feet deep. If it was the same depth all the way through, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But this is just to straighten out the lots in order for the traffic to loop back and come out on Great Road and not through Robinson Road. Thank you.
Quick question.
Thank you.
Dina Flockhart, Gilson Road. So if this article is not approved, the residents of Robinson Road will have to deal with the extra traffic because the traffic will exit onto their road.
Town administrator.
Yes, as the chairman of the planning board just said, there is no egress onto Robinson Road, no curb cuts. They will be coming back onto Great Road.
Her question is if this is not approved.
If this article is not approved, if this article is not approved, then the bank will go back to the plan with the exit onto Robinson Road.
I think that you heard earlier that there was a couple proposals that were directly accessed to Robinson Road. We've met with the residents of Robinson Road a number of times, as the chairman of the select board has indicated, and tried to make every concession possible so you don't just end up with another bank on Robinson Road that, sure, they can make their loop around on their 2.8 acres, but you're getting additional, all that retail space that currently has existed
I'm in support of raising the house. Okay, I'm not arguing with you. I'm saying that if we don't vote to allow them to raise the house, then the residents of Robinson Road might have to deal with all the extra traffic.
we don't know. You have to go through the planning board process.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're ready for a vote. So all those, and remembering it requires a 2/3 vote, we'll try to get this on a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion of Article 14 as printed in the town meeting report and warrant, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay. I declare that to be a 2/3 vote, and the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator, I challenge the declaration.
All right, if you can get 6 other people to stand with you, we'll do a hand count.
Don't leave yet.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we'll do a hand count. Here we go. Well, we've got 7. Thank you. I'm going to need some counters, Madam Clerk. All right. All those in favor of the motion as read, as printed in the warrant, please signify by raising your hand, keeping them raised until you've been counted.
Jim. Jim. No, just raise your hand.
Who's counting?
Doug.
Okay. Got everyone, Diane? All right, all those opposed, same drill, raise your hand, keep it up until you've been counted. All right, and while they're tallying the votes, I just wanted to thank everyone at the town for helping put this town meeting together. Certainly LCTV, Mark and Kirby, and schools, we appreciate their effort. Town administrator, assistant town administrator, their team. Town Council, the Select Board, and the Finance Committee, and welcome to our new Finance Director. Thank you for your help this evening, and I want to mention the Town Clerk and her team for the usual great job. And we'll get this result, and then we'll entertain a motion to dissolve the town meeting. Or you can read it about it tomorrow, whatever you want to do.
Watch it streaming. Thank you.
No, I put it in the bag. I'm going to bring it to Joe. Yeah, he's like, sorry.
Okay, I've got the tally for you. There were 137 votes cast. There were 94 in favor, 43 opposed. Requires 91 votes to achieve the necessary two-thirds, so the motion indeed passed, and I declare it a vote. Thank you very much. And is there a motion to dissolve this special town meeting?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, town meeting is dissolved.